This is Simon Wan from Cornerstone speaking with you today from Hong Kong. And good morning to you, or good afternoon, or good evening, because for Daniel, our speaker, it will be in the morning, but for Blas, it will be in the afternoon. For me, it's almost midnight, so I'm good evening for myself. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and I'm proud to present the Cornerstone Global Leaders webinar. The topic today is how could we adjust strategy to an evolving normal. Today, we have about 4,000 participants registered for the event from 45 countries. A little bit about Cornerstone. Cornerstone is a global executive search and leadership consulting group with more than 30 years of history in 60 offices across the world. So we are happy to host this event, as this is really a major subject that we all would like to talk about. And as you all know, we are living in times of great uncertainty worldwide, which require strong and inspiring leaders with high degree of empathy to lead the business. Today, we are honored to hear from two extraordinary global leaders to share with us their perspective, how they are handling the past as well as how would they be planning for the future. The first speaker I'd like to introduce is Maquivar. He's the president of Global Emerging Markets of WRIGLEY. He's London-based. And the second speaker that we have today is Mr. Daniel Gamba. He's the co-head of Fundamental Equities at BlackRock Investment. He's based in New York. We'll hear from them on two different perspectives, one from the consumer goods industry and with the emerging market focus. And another one is really the large global perspective investment company, BlackRock, that has activities across all industries on what they see as the future. To start with, I'd like our speaker to briefly tell us about yourself and your organization and the role and the specific thing that you have done in the last few months based on the 2020 scenario. Blas, can you give us a little update on what you are doing at this time?
Oh, thank you, Simon, and thanks to Gonzalo and Diego and you for the invite. Super energizing to be with all of you and have a chance to add a little bit of value and help to all of our community, right? So my name is Blas Maquivar, as you say. I am leading what we call Global Emerging Markets. We have 4 geographical leaderships in WRIGLEY, North America being one, China, because its size and its importance being the second one. The third one is Europe, Russia. And the fourth one is the one that I have the privilege to lead, which is emerging markets. So imagine that we place together Latin America plus Asia, excluding China, plus Middle East, plus Africa, all of that together, which are countries that share that great opportunity to accelerate growth because of the population growth in the future, because of the GDP growth, because the categories where we compete in WRIGLEY, chocolate, gum, fruity confections, etc., are underdeveloped in these emerging markets. And that's why we created this business unit to have that level of intentionality to accelerate growth in what we consider is the future for WRIGLEY. I live in London because the geographical spread of my responsibilities is so wide that to have a chat with Asia, I need to have it in the morning maybe, with the Middle East in the afternoon, and with Latin America in the evening. And London allows me to do that versus living in America or living in Asia. London is convenient from a time zone perspective. I am Mexican, as I said. I was born and raised in Mexico, educated both in Mexico and in North America. And then over my career, I've lived in different countries with different assignments across basically 3 companies, Procter & Gamble, then PepsiCo, and finally with Mars, which I've been working for the last 10 years. Now, to answer your question, and trying to stay short and succinct, yeah, I mean, 2020 has been a fascinating year with what COVID is bringing to the table. And probably we are focusing our efforts in 3 big buckets, right? The first one, and the most important one, is to keep our associates safe. We call associates what normally others call employees, but that's our number one responsibility. Our associates are at our factories producing our products. We have 14 factories in emerging markets. Associates that are calling our retailers and displaying our brands in the convenience stores or in the big Walmarts or Carrefours or with our wholesalers. And they are going out of their safety of their home to be able for our consumers to enjoy our brands. And it's our responsibility also to keep them safe. So keeping our associates safe has been our number one duty. The second one is to keep our business running, of course. We are a privately family-owned company that we think long-term. And we are not here just to deliver 2020 or 2021. We've been operating for 100 years, and we will operate successfully for the next 100 years because we think long-term. Nevertheless, we need to continue to operate our business. We need to keep those factories running. We need to keep those products and the supply chain running so that our products and services reach our consumer. And that has been our second priority, to keep the business running. And finally, COVID, yes, brings challenges to the table, and we'll talk about them in a second, but also they bring, in my mind, a great opportunity to accelerate the transformation of our business, to be on top of the consumer and delight the consumer with our products and services. And by doing that, come out successful on the post, let's say, COVID era. So our third priority is how we accelerate the reinvention of Mars Wrigley so that we are future-proof in being a growing, successful business in the industry. And that has been our third priority in the year to date. Those 3 things have kept us occupied the last several months, Simon.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Blas. And Daniel, please introduce a little bit about yourself and tell us about BlackRock and what are the key initiatives that you have done in the last 4 months.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Actually, thank you, Diego and Gonzalo and Cornerstone for organizing this event. And it's really amazing that as Blas was speaking, you can see people from all over the world introducing themselves on the screen here on this platform from Zoom, which is quite interesting, quite amazing to actually see how the world can be actually flattened. And we're talking from 3 different, very disparate time zones. We're actually 12 hours apart, Simon, and it feels like, you know, we're just speaking one next to the other almost, which is quite amazing, right? So as you mentioned, my role is I'm co-head of the Fundamental Equities at BlackRock. It is a global job that I have, basically as part of BlackRock. BlackRock is a asset manager that manages $7 trillion of assets, so it's quite big. And we do operate globally, and we own, I would say, between 3 and 7% of almost all the large cap or the big companies that are globally. So we invest money on behalf of our clients. We have a global client base, and we have clients in each region, in the Americas, in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and we also have clients in Asia Pacific. So it's really a global client base, and my responsibility is a product responsibility which basically looks across multiple different products on the equity side, US, Europe, global, emerging markets, hedge funds, thematic sectors, sustainability. So it's really a broad remit that I have. And as a result of that, my responsibilities are global. So I start my day quite early, normally with Europe, and then move to the US, and then end very late with Asia. So it's actually a 24/7 job that I have. And as Blas was mentioning, I think over the past 6 months, it's been really challenging, but at the same time, it's been very energizing. So our priorities, given my responsibility, I'm really responsible for talent. So really, I would say number 1, number 2, and number 3 is making sure that our talent is safe, our talent is healthy, and our talent actually can operate from day one of the pandemic, when people basically started to work from home. We moved from working across multiple offices, about 35 offices globally, to working on 66,000 offices that everybody had. And our first responsibility was actually to keep the portfolios that we manage on behalf of our clients operational. And the firm has, BlackRock has actually had technology at the center of how we manage our business. And the other part that is being at the center of our business is connectivity. We call it One BlackRock, which means we actually operate in a very horizontal way. We connect with one another constantly, pretty much 24/7. You are connecting with everybody in the business. And that way, when the employees moved to work from home, we were ready from an operational perspective. We were operational literally around the clock. There were some issues in the beginning in terms of do we have the right infrastructure to operate everybody from home? But very quickly, we were operating from home, and we were trading billions of equity and fixed income from home in a very smooth way. Also, we were able to, we move a lot of our priorities around our people safe, our people working well together. And then we also put a big priority into how are we connecting with our clients. So we have actually, that's been the second high priority, has been actually how can we maintain this connectivity with our clients, and how can we share the insights that our portfolio managers, our research teams have with our clients in a smooth way. And I would say it's actually quite remarkable how quickly that's happened in our business. Every week we talk to maybe 5,000 to 10,000 clients globally on the different segments that we have, be it insurance companies, central bankers, registered investment advisors around the world. We have forums. Every week we have multiple forums with our clients where we share our insights. And I would say, so clients has been a big priority. The health of our employees has been a big priority. And we continue to actually think about how is the world changing. And that's been actually focused on the future. And I think we'll talk more about the future, but the future presents challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. I agree with Blas. There's a lot of opportunities. We're lucky where we sit because our business, which is really an information delivery business, has done extremely well. And it's done well because we have the information edge. We have the portfolio manager sitting across the planet, and we've been able to actually share those insights with our clients through our portfolios. People have seen that the stock market and the equity market has actually done very well in this period of time. But I would say even more importantly has been sharing the information advantage that BlackRock has for being kind of technology driven and being actually located across the world. That's given us a very good information edge that we are actually sharing with our clients. So happy to report that the firm is actually done well, and very importantly, our employees are doing well, and we're very pleased to share this insight with our clients.
Thank you, Daniel. Looking forward for the coming 6 months, plus, what do you see are the main challenges or opportunity in your business space for you, Blas?
Yes, Simon. So we, WRIGLEY, we are a treat and snack company with, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know some of our brands, right? Snickers, M&M's, Galaxy, Orbit, Skittles, etc. So we have chocolate, we have gum, we have fruity confections. And probably the biggest challenge is how we are really understanding the new consumer in the context of COVID and post-COVID. The COVID is bringing to the table certain macro shifts to the consumer, like what we call the digital default, where clearly consumers are satisfying many of their needs now digitally instead of going outside of their safety of their homes to buy products and services. And I'm sure that all of us, all of you are doing that in your own homes, using Amazon, using eBay, using Deliveroo, depending on which country you live, right? Also, there is a macro shift around what we call back to nature, close to home, where consumers are spending, of course, more time at home, enjoying time with their families, having new rituals, playing games, watching a movie, watching TV, rituals that probably in the past were not as present as they are today. Also, is bringing an environmental awakening of consumers being more aware of sustainability, of plastics, etc. A piece around holistic health and well-being, really embracing, let's say, a healthy process. Right, with checks the consumer is doing, and we really need to be best in class first on understanding those consumer changes, and best than anyone is the #1 priority, so that as a consequence of that understanding, we can then use WRIGLEY's products, brands, services to delight the consumer in the context of these consumer shifts. And to do that, we will need to be agile, we will need to be courageous, and we will need to take risks, because it will be, we have limited resources, as anyone does. We don't have an unlimited budget in terms of overheads, in terms of marketing budget, in terms of supply. There is a limited resource, and we need to be super agile, courageous on how do we shift those resources towards the bets that we want to make to delight the consumer in the context of the new consumer shifts. And that's where a lot of our associate culture, behavior, capabilities come into play. We have very strong brands. We have, of course, very strong associates, employees, and now we need to combine them to be agile, risk takers, courageous. So by doing all of that, we delight the best than anyone, the new consumer that is embracing new habits, that is shifting towards certain areas that probably in the past, we were seeing those changes towards digital, for example, but probably COVID is fast forwarding something that was going to happen in 5 years or in 3 years, is going to fast forward the change, and probably that will happen in half the time, in a year and a half. So we no longer have the luxury of time to transform ourselves, because probably in the past we could have done it in 3-5 years, and now we have to do it probably in less than 2 years to stay successful, to stay delighting the consumer, and as a consequence be a prosperous business as we have been over the last 100 years. Those are the two big challenges that we have in front of us, Simon.
Thank you, Blas. Daniel, you are in a market of the future. Huh? You are the investment arm. You are basically look for long-term results and short-term opportunities. Given the change of the market in the digital, virtual, and the holistic lifestyle, what are the opportunity and challenges for business like yours in the next 6 months or 3 years?
Yes, and thank you for the question, Simon. And there is challenges, but there's like tremendous opportunities. I think our view is COVID-19 and the pandemic has accelerated market trends that were prevalent there. All what happened is they're just being accelerated. And clearly, I did mention, how important it is to actually have some information advantage to be able to drive that through. And I think in COVID, in this period, it's been even more important. Clearly, in the past, just to give you a sense, in the past, investing used to be art and science, but it was driven by use of accounting information and use of just talking to clients and talking to companies particularly. These days, the use of technology and data complements that. So we have investors on the ground who are very close to new companies, but at the same time, we need to leverage the power of technology these days. We leverage information now driven by, for instance, location information that people have, driven by inventory information that people have, we use a lot of, satellite information to be able to see where the opportunities are located. And our view is we see a lot of opportunity in areas such as health. Not a surprise, health is an area where it's been raised as a very, very important area of the market, especially preemptive health. So use of DNA, use of genomics, so that people know how can they almost preempt having a particular disease or a particular issue. This is beyond COVID. This is really any disease where you can use preemptive health to actually continue that. And of course, related to that is pharmaceutical companies, biotechnology companies. So health sciences is one area where we see substantial growth over the long term, frankly speaking. The other area Blas mentioned, but this really, we in BlackRock has made a big statement, and we actually made it. We've been talking about this over the past 2 to 3 years, but our CEO made a big statement in January about sustainability and how sustainability and sustainable driven companies are going to actually outperform the market. And what you're seeing as an acceleration of that. So this year, we've seen tremendous success on sustainable related solutions. Solutions such as companies that invest in circular economy, or companies who are really aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. All those companies are outperforming companies who haven't really evolved into the new clean energy world, the new world where social interactions with the employees, social interactions with the society are tremendously important. So we are really very, very focused on companies who actually use either climate change or environmental factors or social factors to outperform the market. I think those companies will be a big area of growth. I would mention 2 other areas. The other one is technology. I mean, that's an obvious one. how technology is disrupting and how technology is changing business models, but also software companies, infrastructure companies, companies who are basically using, who are like providing the technology for having, you know, a conversation like this. Those companies will continue to be basically driving. Are you hearing me, Blas? Because for some reason, I think I lost connectivity, and that's part of the new world on the video side, but I don't know if you are hearing me.
I can.
Okay, so it looks like I lost connectivity on the video side, but clearly technology and infrastructure technology companies are also going to continue to drive success. I will mention, last but not least, the emergence of China as a real driver of future long-term growth in the marketplace. I cannot not emphasize how important that is. Yes, there is more tension between the US and China, and there's much more tension between some of the European countries and China. At the same time, though, I think there is a big emergence of technology competition from Chinese companies who are really challenging or are developing technology as fast as their counterparts in the Silicon Valley and their counterparts in other parts of the world. So clearly that's another big area. China and emerging Asia, it's another big area where we see a lot of the winners. So some of the challenges and the risks that we need to manage on a daily basis is clearly the health pandemic is number one. So I think to the degree that countries can start to continue to recover from the pandemic, they will continue to accelerate their growth. So countries who are doing better on that regard will grow ahead of other companies. Clearly governments and how governments are supporting economies is the second factor that we look into the risk side. And of course, over the next three, 4 months, we have the US election. That's going to drive a lot of the dynamics that we need to stay close to, as well as the tension between the US and China, which is a big macroeconomic tension that we will need to manage. So we need to stay close to those risks. At the same time, take advantage of what I mentioned, Simon. I mentioned health sciences, I mentioned sustainability, I mentioned technology, and I mentioned China.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Daniel. I want to go back to the subject with Blas on your associates, that you try to make sure they are safe and also productive. In the new way of digital marketing or digital channel or virtual market, how do you see the key changes that your key staff might have to change also in the next 6 months? What are the new quality of your best employees should have for the next 6 months?
Yes, Simon. So probably, yeah, I look at the question from two different angles. Okay, the first one, and going back a little bit to the behaviors that I expressed, we need to continue to reinvent and grow our business in the context of COVID, and this piece around agility, risk-taking, being courageous, being digitally savvy in all aspects of the business, not only on selling through digital channels, but digitalizing our business, the use of analytics, as Daniel says, technology that provides analytics, that provides insights to drive our decisions is crucial. And I think that the associates that we want in Mars Incorporated and in Mars Wrigley is exactly this, right? Associates that are agile to be able to navigate through ambiguity and complexity, because COVID is just one example, but the reality is that our future will continue to be disrupted by different things. And we need associates that are, again, agile in the way they can approach the challenges. Associates that are courageous, right? That we, of course, as leaders, and it's probably one of my most important responsibilities as the leader of emerging markets, is how do I foster risk-taking? How do I foster failure so that our associates are able to make decisions, even if that means that we sometimes fail, because as long as we learn from our failures and then we make our decisions better, then it becomes a completely positive cycle that we need to have. So risk-taking is super, super important, and be kind, of course, being courageous. And the piece around digital applies to everything that we do, again, not only on selling our products and services to our consumers, but also in the way that we operate, in the way that we make decisions, in the way that we use analytics to inform and educate our strategies. And if I give you an example, before COVID, pre-COVID, because of my role, as you can imagine, and as many of you, I used to travel 70% of my time, visiting Asia, Latin America, Middle East, Africa. I was really spending a lot of time traveling, and I'm very fortunate to have Karen, my wife, that supports me in all of this, and my children, both in Mexico and here in London. But I really used to travel quite a bit. And now, with COVID, I haven't traveled since my last travel was Australia at the end of February. That was my last travel.
Okay.
But business needs to continue, and our ways of working, our rhythm of performance, our strategic processes, the way that we connect with associates, the way we make decisions, they need to continue regardless of this lack of physical connection. And we have completely adapted our ways of working, our rhythm of performance, to now being digital and having, I just stepped out 2 hours ago before I entered this great webinar on an Asia virtual market visit, where part of my central team and the Asia leadership team took us through a virtual market visit of South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, where we went through the stores visually. And then we reviewed the business, we talked about the associates, we made decisions, and all of that in the past would have happened in a visit to Hong Kong or in a visit to South Korea. And now that will not happen for a while. So we have to adapt and be, of course, digitally savvy. Now, and my last comment regarding this, I do miss human connectivity, if I am honest. Yes, we can make this work, but I think that the future will change, and probably the amount of travel that we used to do will not happen as much, but I think we will continue to travel. I think that the need to go every day to an office will not be there anymore, and there will be a lot more flexibility on who goes to work every day or not, and being flexible and using more digital technologies, of course. But I also think that, and I see this in the associates that I talk to every day, we miss human connection. There is a lot of creativity and spark that is achieved through physical human connection in the corner of the coffee machine, or while we are between meetings, and we get a lot of energy, enthusiasm, and happiness when we interact as humans. And I think that I miss that. I know that a lot of my associates miss that, and in the future is probably the tricky piece, or the key question is, how do we find the right balance so that we, at the same time, we don't go back to the past. At the same time, we acknowledge the need of human connection as a spark of creativity and success. And probably that question we haven't yet answered, to be honest, and it's going to be very, very important that we crack the code and find the right balance on that physical and digital connection amongst us. Let me stop here.
Thank you, Blas. Overall, the retail industry has been affected, but it might not be as much as in your company categories. But then, what would be your advice or strategy for executives that are facing a weakened market because of the COVID-19? What are your suggestions to these kind of situations?
Sorry, is for me the question, Simon?
Yes, plus,
Okay.
let's say in the consumer end, some sector are being affected.
So Mars Incorporated, very quickly, we have a pet care segment, which is formed by hospitals, veterinaries, and pet food. Brands like Pedigree, like Whiskas, Royal Canin, and veterinary services that few people know that we have a global veterinary services and hospitals. Then we have the food segment, rice and salad dressing, pasta. And then we have Mars Wrigley, the third segment, where I work. And then we have a human nutrition business called Edge, which is a smaller, relatively smaller versus the first three. The pet business and the food business, because of what COVID is bringing to the table, are growing way ahead of expectations. Consumers are cooking more at home. Just look at yourselves. I'm sure that you guys and your families are cooking more at home. Also, consumers are adopting more pets or buying more pets, and that is generating the need for more pet food, for more veterinary services. So both our pet and our food businesses are growing. They have strong fundamentals, and they are growing ahead of expectations and ahead of a year ago. Mars Wrigley, because of the essence of our brands, which are impulse brands that are sold outside of home, is of course being impacted by COVID. But fortunately, the pet and food strength is more than compensating the softness of Mars Wrigley. Now, let me stay on Mars Wrigley and the softness of Mars Wrigley. Yes, we are seeing a decline, especially in gum, in chewing gum, because people buy gum when they go to the store to buy milk, bananas, or bread, and you are doing the line in the checkout, and suddenly you see the gum and you buy it. It's not that you plan to buy a gum. So that is being affected by the lockdowns across the world. The chocolate business is also being affected, not as much as gum, but also being affected, although still several rituals like watching TV, having a nice dinner, watching a movie, playing a board game, you do that with chocolate sometimes, and you share a chocolate like M&Ms with your family when you are playing a game. So chocolate is being affected, but not as much as gum. From a channel point of view, which is your question, the big formats, what we call the brick and mortars, those big stores that have 40 checkouts, those are being impacted significantly. Then we are seeing a lot of growth coming from digital, from players like Amazon, like Tencent in China, and their equivalent in Asia, etc. So digital is growing significantly, is quintupling its size in just 6 months. And then you have channels that are close to home, that are convenient, where also the consumer, now that the lockdowns are easing down, instead of going 10 kilometers away to a big store and having to drive their cars and going to a parking lot, they are replacing those type of trips to a more convenient trip to the corner shop, either a mom and pop store or a convenient supermarket, a petrol station, etc. So we are seeing clear declines in certain channels, and we are seeing clear positive wins, positive growth in other channels. And going back to my earlier comment several minutes ago, the challenge of us leaders is how do we pick and choose ahead of the game those channels that we think will continue to grow, or that are not yet still growing, but because of the consumer changes will grow in the near future, and how do we shift resources to those bets so that by doing that we accelerate our own growth. So in Mars Wrigley, from a channel point of view, a lot of the work that we are doing is by understanding the consumer. We will understand and, let's say, predict which channels we expect to grow aggressively, which channels we expect to remain flat or stagnant, and which channels we expect to decline. And by understanding that, that will educate our bets on where do we want to win big, where we want to maintain, and which channels we want to probably disengage or take resources out so that we can then double or triple down on those channels that are growing faster. And that is the resource allocation work that is front and center to us as leaders, to really make choices and not, as one of my ex-bosses say, not to peanut butter everything and give a little bit of resource to everything. Because by doing that, you are just diluting your resources. You have to be courageous and take risks and choose those few but important channels where you want to place your bet, Simon. That will be my answer.
Thank you. Daniel, on the on Blas' comment to be ahead of the game, and you also mentioned talent is such an important side of the success formula on BlackRock. What do you see are the new changes that you expect from the top executives in the investment community?
So there's actually a lot of commonality on what Blas was mentioning in terms of talent. I'll say clearly in BlackRock, being the leader is actually tough to maintain leadership, right? Like our president always says, like, you know, it's easier to be number 2 or number 3 because you can be watching number 1 and just copy number 1. So I think in the case of BlackRock, in many parts, not everywhere, but in many areas, we are actually leaders, and we've made statements with regards to talent, which I would say we will need to continue to accelerate. So I'll tell you a couple of areas where we have to accelerate, right? Like one is clearly leaders that not only incorporate traditional, you know, like traditional learning regarding the traditional industries, but clearly adopting leaders that have a lot of technology and data scientists within their DNA is quite important. And not only by bringing new leaders, but also training our leaders. So I think over this period, our focus on training and taking new experiences is being quite a new thing for us to accelerate. We have the BlackRock Academies, we call, where we have codified our knowledge from, you know, different markets, equities, fixed income, alternatives, products, sustainability, etc. But I think what this period has shown us is we have to actually double down on training and on the new areas of growth. We have to continue to actually invest on that. And not only through training, but also what we call adaptive resourcing. So we've actually put in place a procedure by which we observe the areas of either investing or the areas of clients where, you know, we were growing faster or areas where we're not growing as fast. And we are offering our younger colleagues an opportunity to actually take a different experience for a period of time. So we're creating a lot of internships opportunities for like our, I would say, middle up and coming talent, so that they can move from, say, the ETF area into the active area, or go from the active area in some parts of the business into maybe different regions. So we've seen, as I mentioned to you, we've seen resurgence, particularly on the thematic areas, on the areas where you have more sector exposure, and we used to have more resourcing on the core areas, like, you know, just traditional US growth or US value. So we are actually giving our talent opportunities to actually rotate in a much more aggressive and deliberate way so that they can actually work across the organization. And that's a key talent skill, Simon, that we all talk about, but we don't necessarily have been deliberate about how we train people to basically experience different areas continually. I'm an example of that, right? Like I grew my talent skills by starting the business for Latin America markets. I built a lot of business in Mexico and Colombia and Brazil and Chile and Peru. And then I moved to New York to actually build more of an Americas expertise with the ETF business, leading our ETF business. And after having like 5 or 6 years of great growth, I was offered this opportunity to now lead globally our active business, which is quite different. And most people will think it's a business that was declining. So given my experience on the growth business, I was able to identify some trends and some changes that are helping our business actually turn around and become core and front and center, right? So change management is quite important, and people need to actually look at that as a key tenet of future growth. I would say very important also diversity, but not diversity just as a name saying we want, people with different gender, we need people with different race, which we do. And frankly speaking, during this period of time, given the tension in the US, we've made strong statements about our need to increase our race diversity at BlackRock. So we have made a statement that we're going to increase that by 30% from the colored employees because there's true, racial disparities, right? And those are disparities. All you need to do really is bring the talent so that they can actually have a seat at the table and have basically being able to judge what is needed from the business from that angle. But there's diversity on many angles, right? Like in financial services, we used to hire particularly people from what they call STEM, right? Normally sciences and math. And I think we continue to do that, and economics as well. But now we're really going for like liberal arts and people who have like more English majors. And we have a lot of people who are like former lawyers who are now leading different businesses because they provide a different perspective into how to grow different businesses. So we are really diversifying on that. We are also diversifying, instead of just going to the top Ivy League schools, we continue to do that, but we also go into a much broader number of schools. Our class of a new graduate program, we hired about 500 people just literally 2 weeks ago. We onboarded 500 new people globally. Everything was virtually, but we included people from like over 200 schools globally. And we look for talent in a much more broad way because now you can do it. In the past, you needed to actually visit schools, one-to-one. Now you can actually, you can connect to the schools and you can do hiring using virtual means so that you can actually get people. So we are really emphasizing diversity in executive talent as well because it's absolutely needed, right? So diversity, more technology talent, as well as people who have basically diversity for multiple experiences, including technology.
Thank you, Daniel. But as a major investment executive in the world, what would you recommend to the CEO of service industry like hotel or airline, or what would you recommend to them that what they should be doing then?
So I think it continues to be, I would say there's like 3 factors that people need to look into this, right? I think in this new world, society is watching how companies are treating their employees and how they're treating their societies. So I think the whole mantra of shareholder returns continue to be there, but I think it's actually become much more broad, Simon. So we are now looking after more stakeholders than we used to do, right? Like when people go and take an MBA, people are taught, shareholder value or value creation, and you need to deliver value for your shareholders. That continues to be very important, but we need to also have another lens, which is the society lens. And the society is actually telling us we want a talent base that is quite diverse and is diverse on multiple angles. And we want also employees who are not only diverse by, color and backgrounds, but also age. So we need to also build a bench of people who can also represent what they want, because that's the next generation of talent, right? So clearly, people are going to be watching how you treat society, how sustainable your practices are, how you treat your employees, and also very importantly, how quickly do you evolve your business model? I think the different industries may need to either find new areas of value or evolve their business models, right? Like everybody who thought that disruption in their industry was happening, but it wasn't happening to them, because everybody likes to say change is good, but you just don't change me. And I think it is changing everybody, right? Like people need to they need to look at the core of their business model and evolve their operations, right? Like I think some industries are going to be more challenged, especially
Yes.
industries that have, like fixed assets, and like hotels, like airlines. But I think they're gonna need to find ways to operate in a different way, either shorter distance for travel, or maybe evolve into other service part of their value chain to be able to adapt, right? Like I think people are going to be watching, again, sustainability factors, their employees, very much how they treat their employees, and then how do they evolve their business models. And I think people need to be much more entrepreneurial. People need to really drive into how do you disrupt your own industry. We've disrupted our own value proposition multiple times. There were no asset managers who were investing in active and passive, and we were able to actually do that. And then we're evolving now into private and liquid products, and we have to continue to do that. And I think people are watching, are you willing to transform your business model as you prepare for a post-COVID-19 new normal?
Thank you. The last question I'd like to ask Blas is on the subject of, over the last few months, what is the most important personal learning that you feel that you collected over the last few months during the COVID-19 transition? Blas?
Yeah, probably, and same as all of you, of course. These lockdowns, staying at home, has brought a lot of reflection, right, on the work side, on the family side, on in general, right, in all of our aspects of life. And if I stay a little bit on the work side, probably it has reinforced the conviction, the belief of everything starts and ends with our associates. Again, what some of you call employees, and I really mean it. And how our number one challenge as leaders is to engage our associates, to keep them energized, to keep them motivated, to build their resilience. And it's not only about physical health, of course, that is important, but there is as important the emotional health, their mental health. Is those two things combined that make a successful associate. And I've realized and reflected on that, and as a consequence, I've shifted my time to spend it even more to connect with associates across all levels of the organization, because I've always said that if we have the right associates, capable, risk takers, agiles, and we have in the case of the fast-moving consumer goods industry, and we have the right brands, we are unstoppable. Unstoppable. It doesn't matter if COVID comes or something else comes later. If we have those two things, but really the associate angle has been in my mind every day, and it has been probably my most important learning and an area of intentionality, Simon, over the last several months.
Thank you, Blas. Daniel, my last question to you is, how do you expect when will the COVID-19 pandemic be no longer a factor in your investment strategy, and also when would we go back to the 2019 level globally, because it has been quite a big sharp decline. So what is your crystal ball when you look at the future?
I wish we knew, right? Like I think we're staying close to, we're staying just close to the what's, you know, how the pandemic is evolving. Before I go into that answer, let me just say, like, I fully agree with what just Blas said. In taking care of people and relationships is become the most important factor during this crisis. Every day you talk to friends that you haven't talked to for a long time, and you actually give them some great message to them, and that's actually pretty good. And I was talking to somebody else this morning on how great it is these days that when you have a half-an-hour break, you can have a coffee with your family, which in the past that wasn't possible, right? When is this going to switch? I think it's really a function of how quickly we will evolve into finding, if you want, controlling the spread of the virus. And I've seen some countries do a better job than others. And it's incredible, right? When you see people like in New Zealand, like there's like a handful of cases that you can count with your hand. They're actually taking it so seriously that they will go back to closing and getting back to quarantine, right? Like, I think the countries who will accelerate an orderly back to controlling and living with the virus among them, they will do better. Like, and you see that also now that the Northern Hemisphere is going back to school. That's also very important. Some countries, like in Norway, talking to a friend of mine, they're back to school for like 4 weeks and nothing's happening. And those who live closer to the US or read the newspapers on the US, it's drama after drama after drama, right? So unless the countries get their act together, I think it's going to be tough to say that we're back to basically pre-COVID times. Now, the reality though is we strongly believe pre-COVID world is just not, is like change, right? Once things change and they change for a period of time, they're not gonna be back to pre-COVID. I think something else will come back. And we just need to be ready. So I think what we discussed today in terms of change as a person. So I think if there's one message that I want to deliver to everybody who's attending is change is part of the new skill set for the future. And you have to adapt to the new world and find opportunities in that new environment. And I think opportunities like today, like we're talking to you in Hong Kong and we're talking to Blas in London, it's remarkable, right? So now you can think of the world as your new market, and you need to think of use of technology as the new normal. And yes, over time we'll be back to office. We will be back to the office. I'm planning to be back in the office on a hybrid way, like, you know, maybe once or twice a week, starting after the Labor Day here in the US, which is normally September 8th. That week, there's gonna be a lot of more new normal. But the new normal is different. It will include technology. And now you have technology. I can talk to you anytime, Simon, at any time. And that means the opportunities are much bigger. People have many opportunities to rebuild their business models. So think about change as an opportunity that actually COVID is giving all of us to recreate the business models and finally accept that changing business models every 3 to 5 years, it's important. I'm telling you, it's part of the DNA of BlackRock, because BlackRock started 30 years ago from like no assets, right? So it has a very entrepreneurial mindset, but that's part of the new normal. New normal is entrepreneurial mindset, use of technology, and continue connecting with people, because that's really the new normal.
Thank you, Daniel. I think your statement and plus closing comment reflect on what we see in the new normal is both an opportunity and a challenge. So being entrepreneurial is so important, to be able to say the can-do attitude rather than the complaint attitude, right? So this is really something. We are running out of time, but I'd like to thank you personally for your time to share with us on your insights and your perspective on how to lead through these uncertain times. I'm sure all of us has taken your recommendations and messages very carefully. And at Cornerstone, we are going to put today's recording also at the Cornerstone website for ones that want to hear back some of the comment that Blas and Daniel has made. And today's global webinar is organized by our Gonzalo Dor, the Managing Director of Cornerstone Mexico, together with Diego Cubas, who is the head of Cornerstone Marketing Worldwide. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, Blas, and also Daniel, and I wish you a wonderful day, and we'll be in touch. And thank you for your support and your guidance today to all that I attended. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
I wish you good night, or good morning, and good afternoon also. Good night.
Thank you, Simon. Have a good night. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.